Hi, I'm Melissa. Welcome to SIT's Certificate in General Horticulture. This week we're looking at landscape horticulture, so we've come to the waterways to investigate one of New Zealand's most versatile plants. Coming up on the show, we take a prickly look at our desert friends, the cacti, and find out everything you didn't know about the flax bush. First up, we're heading off to Thompson's Bush for a little native tree planting. What are we planting today, Sandra?
Okay, we've got Pittosporum tenufolium, which is a kahuhu, native species of New Zealand, and this is going here in Thompson's Bush, which is a native bush, and it's part of a revegetation project.
Great, fantastic.
So, yeah.
So how big do they grow to?
They 3 metres or so, yeah, quite big, quite bushy. Good as screen plants and shelter plants, and good on the edges of the bush and things when you're doing a revegetation project.
Fantastic. So how long does it take to get to that size?
They're quite fast growers, probably 4 or 5 years. Yeah.
Alrighty, let's get digging.
Okay.
Do you need a hand with anything?
I should be alright. One of the first things you need to do when you're planting is make sure that there's no competing plants that are going to compete for your soil, for the light, the nutrients, and for water. Although today is not going to be an issue with water. And what you always try and do when you're planting is to make sure that the hole you dig is about twice the size of the container that the plant is in.
Okay.
So if there's a whole lot of weeds and grasses and things on the ground, the best thing to do for a start would be to chip it all off and make an area, a large area around where you want to plant. But in this case it's been sprayed and it's pretty clear of weeds, so we can just dig straight into here. So hopefully it's not
great.
too...
So how close could the next tree be?
1.5 metres or so away would be about right.
Cool.
So it's pretty good soil here to dig into.
Great. So is that important to check before you decide to put a native tree anywhere, to make sure the soil and ground's good?
Yeah, you can add fertiliser in as well. Fertiliser will help the growing conditions, and yeah, this is not too bad at this stage. We haven't got any fertiliser, but we often will put some slow release fertiliser in the hole just before we plant the tree. So
great.
Yeah.
Take that fast.
Yeah, easy one, this one. So you just make sure that the hole's nice and big, and that the plant's going to go in, but not too deep as well.
Okay.
So that's about right for there. You just make sure you take the plant out of the plastic bag, and it's always important to make sure that the roots, sometimes you might find if it's been in the container too long, the roots will have got really dense and tight, and they need to be loosened. This one's pretty good.
Okay.
But sometimes you'll find that it's really dense around the bottom, so you just loosen that up so that they can come away.
Do you loosen the whole thing right from the sort of
top?
top?
Often if it's really dense, you'll get a knife and cut down the sides and cut round the bottom, just to make sure the roots will grow. Otherwise, the roots will go round and round the tree, and it can fall over. And yeah. So you just place that in the hole. That's when you get your hands dirty.
Mm-hmm.
You push that soil right in round and give it a bit of a shake to make sure the soil's getting right round the whole plant, and then gently push it in round the plant so that a bit more soil we can put on top.
And do you leave it now? Is it able to look after itself from here?
Yeah, you'll probably need to come back in perhaps 12 months or less, just to keep an eye on it to make sure that the weed species haven't grown up around it. And in drier areas especially, it's quite a good idea just to compact it down slightly lower than the surrounding ground, so that the water will flow in and keep it nice and wet.
So do they need quite a lot of water?
Yep, whenever you plant a plant you should make sure that it's nice and damp. This one's not going to have any worries at all, is it? It's not a problem today.
Thanks for the tip, Sandra. So there's more plants to do. Shall we get on and do those ones?
Hi, I'm Greg from Dyax, and today we're talking about landscaping your section. Now, when it comes to landscaping your section, I would say 90% of the people get it wrong by just going into a garden centre, looking at the plants, seeing what they like, taking it home and planting it and hoping it does well. Down here it's not really that simple. You really do need to be looking at what sort of shelter you're using, and some of the examples of shelter best for down here on a large section like 5 acre blocks or larger. The leylandii is very popular, quick growing and can be trimmed up nicely as a hedge. Highly recommended. You can also look at some of your natives, but today we're doing the leylandii. Medium sections, your pittosporums is a good one, reasonably quick growing and nice and hardy for down here. And on a smaller section, something a bit more upright, like the satinwood here, is really nice and upright, so it doesn't need a lot of maintenance, quick growing. And then once you've got your shelter in, you can start to look at the plants that you like. Making sure of the right soil conditions and that our plants will withstand the frosts. So it's always good to select locally grown stuff or hardened off down here in our conditions. So everyone, I wish them the best of luck and happy gardening.
Now that was a handy tip. In a few mo's we're going to find out everything about this stuff, Horticulture, New Zealand flax. But firstly, it's everything you've ever needed to know about cacti.
I'm Lynn Evans, I'm the president of the local Cactus and Succulent Society, and I have a fair sized collection, probably about 3,000 plants all up, but you'll only see a few today. I have grown probably 60% of these plants from seed that I've imported from overseas, and I've collected quite a few from our club's get-togethers, and I buy the odd one at the warehouse if they got something special there. Well, the seeds, when you import the seed, you have to go to the MAF site on the computer and make sure the seeds are allowed to come into the country. If they're not allowed, of course, they don't get as far as you. You might have bought them, but they don't get as far as you. And then eventually they arrive in my mailbox, and I'll go through them and make sure they've got names that are legible, and then I'll spend maybe 2 days, depending on how many seeds I get, and I spend the 2 days sowing them out into little pottles, and each pottle gets sealed in a bag and then put somewhere warm, and it might take 2 days, but it might take 4 weeks for them to germinate. And then you have to water them carefully for about 6 months before they're big enough to plant on into bigger pots. And some of them will flower within the first 12 months. Usually the first thing, when the weather starts getting warm, they'll show signs of flowering. Normally it's just the buds will appear. Then you start watering them, but you do it carefully, because if you're still getting frosts, you've got to be careful. They'll flower anywhere from probably September in Southland, probably from September through till April, depending on the species. Well, there again, it depends on the species as to the height or the size they'll grow. there's one there that's about 10 years old, and it just grows into a clump that spreads about a foot, 2 foot high to, it can be up to 3 foot wide. But some of them, which I have a couple outdoors, can grow 10 feet, 12 feet tall. That's here. I feed them with a liquid fertiliser, but if my collection was smaller, I'd probably use granules. But in my case, I use a liquid fertiliser, and I'll spend once a month and I'll just water them all by hand with a liquid fertiliser. They would probably go better outdoors if, if we had the right weather. They would grow much better outdoors. But in the glass house, they seem to survive, and they flower for me, so that's all I ask for. Well, the main reason cactus have thorns, there's 2 reasons mainly. One is to protect itself from animals, because they're quite fleshy once you get past the thorns. It's to protect them from animals eating them, and also it acts as a sunshade and stops the flesh from dehydrating in the bright sunshine, because they grow in hot deserts mainly. Yeah, that's the main reason.
Des, where does the common flax originate from?
It's a native of New Zealand, and I think we're very lucky to have it. Unfortunately, we're not using it today, but you know, it was very important in its day.
What are the main purposes of and usage of flax?
It originally, of course, all for rope and twine, because that was, you know, the whalers and sealers needed it in that day, and Captain Cook, of course, that's why he liked New Zealand too, and toured around and found it. And they needed it in those days because rope didn't last very long, so they needed to replenish ropes and things. And of course, the Maoris made wonderful use of it for clothing. They used it for medicines, and used it for making so many things, for carrying their kit bags, all the sorts of things they used it for. Very innovative people.
What are the best growing conditions for flax?
Of course, we just our normal weather and normal conditions, and you know, latterly we just in my day really, flax was left in swamps, and people all thought, well, it must be a swamp product, but it really wasn't. It was only because swamps were harder to develop, and people developed all the good land for a start, and it was left in swamps. But the flax grows on the very best land. But it needs a good regular rainfall, and that's of course what we have in New Zealand.
So how do you harvest flax?
Well, the first thing you do when you go to cut flax is put down your bands, and that's what I'm attempting to do here. Take a strip off the front and a strip off the back, and then you divide your blade down. And I'm using a diseased leaf blade because it's not wasting a good blade. And you split it there. Tie these ends together. This makes your bottom band. There you put your knife in behind and pull it up on an angle. Pull it out, and there's your first fan of flax cut. One of the key things when you're tying flax was to put a butt band around them, so that this band wouldn't slide up the.
Okay.
When you went to lift it, you see, it was the right way to do that. You see, you had to lift it here and rolled up your body and onto your shoulder, and that was the way you. And then you had it in this position. You threw it onto the deck of your truck. If you bring that knife in for
Sure thing.
That'd be good.
So how long's the mill been here for?
Well, my grandfather bought the property in 1911.
Gee.
And there was a flax mill on it at that stage. It was but it was at another end of the property.
Now that we've harvested our bundle of flax, it's time to put that plant to some good use. Let the milling begin. So is that the full process we've just watched now?
No, from here it has to go out and be plaited very thinly on the wires of fences, and thinly to try and keep the colour right. And then from there it stays out in the fences for a week to a fortnight. A week if you've got very nice weather and a little bit of rain at night, and all the rain and the wind, they all help to weather it. And then of course the tails need to be nicely weathered, just as those ones are, because when they come in here they've got to go through an automatic scutching machine. Now the idea is there's quite a bit of rubbish in that, so the butts need a little bit of dressing, and the tails need to be flicked into the machine, and the machine will actually clean the vegetation off those tails. It doesn't cut it off, it actually cleans them. These are all the short threads that have come out of that little bit of fibre that I put through the scutcher there, and you can see they come out, and this was a very important product in its day. That came out of that little bit, and it's all the nice fine fibres. Now that was used in fibrous plaster ceilings in houses. And I don't know what they use today in place of it, but that's what it was used for then. It was used for in PT mats for many years, and the main products were latterly making into wool packs. Oh, cool! And wool packs and flax matting, Brucella and Cordella matting, and that was very, very hard wearing matting. This matting here came out of a house in Riverton just recently. And this piece of material came from a house in Tianau. Of course, that's a brand new wool pack, and it just shows you what was the uses of those things in its day.
Thanks, Des. What a process. I'll never look at flax the same again.
No, that's great. Good. Pleased to share it with you.
Yeah, hello Lindsay. Landscape, in this particular application, we want to grow on the side of the hill so that we can get the sun hard against it. So in places we've planted trees for soil stability. Soil stability is an integral part of growing on the side of the hill. We've done various tests on the soil, dug profiles all the way down, and we decided on strip growing. That's the leftover of our flowers from the summer, as you can see here. It's now very much the beginning of winter, so there's not much really to be seen in the way of it. So we have a variety of flowers that attract beneficial insects, and others that provide soil stability with a long central taproot that goes down about 3 feet. And we have not had any problems. The soil itself at the moment we cultivate. Then we have 3 or 4 different crops. Some of them will be nitrogen fixing to suit the following crop. The less cultivation the better. In places where we were a little worried about soil stability, we've planted trees about 3 or 4 metres across. Most of them are fruit trees, and then we cut out the ones in the middle to leave them about 3 or 4 metres apart, which is a desirable distance for a fruit tree from another fruit tree. Unfortunately, I haven't got very much to show you here in the way of what we plant, but come back at Christmas time.
Thanks, Lindsay. That's new to me. Now we're going to try a hand at a little propagating with Nev. Neville, what do we need to know about propagating?
Well, it's good to have some nice clean secateurs, clean trays, nice warm environment, and you can easily get some seeds available from any garden centre. I've got one here today, Melissa, that's lettuce, and I thought you can buy lettuces, seeds, packets of seeds, really at any garden centre, along with seeds from shrubs and that are readily available. So you can
propagate anything?
Yes, within reason you can as a home gardener. And I've got some here to explain today, or to show you today. Cool. We've got lettuces here, Melissa. Now you can sprinkle these little lettuce seedlings here. We buy from the garden centres. Bags of seed raiser mix is readily available at all garden centres. And buying a small bag of that with a nice clean pot, buying the seed, you can easily sow the seed in the pots above here like this. By then, you can then put paper and glass on top of that. Okay. Put that into a nice warm area, such as your cupboard, likes of a hot water cupboard, and glass paper over the top of that, and that will start to germinate in the warmth. What does the paper over top do? Keeps it dark, and the seeds germinate in the dark much quicker and much better, and keeps the warmth in there as well. The moment the seed starts to germinate, you then take your glass and your paper away. And how long does that usually take? About 8 to 10 days. Oh, very good. And from there, it goes out into the light, and the seedlings can be pricked out from that into little punnets, and you would bring those seedlings away for lettuces for in the early spring. Can you show us some other kinds of cuttings? Yes, propagation by cuttings, tip cuttings, normally is grown from shrubs. Example of Hebes is one, and it's of last season's growth. So the growth that put on last season is the tip that we use for making a cutting. Here's some foliage from the side growth of last season's growth on the Hebes outside, and we select just nice young growth on the sides, like so these here. I've got some here that I've had pre-cut off. So these just chopped off the sides? Yes, they're cut off the side, Melissa, and there's lots of ways of doing it, but we first of all use a nice clean tray. Okay. I've got one prepared here, a pot with a propagation medium in it. You can use nice washed river sand or pumice, and we use secateurs, clean secateurs, or even household snips. So with big cuttings we use secateurs such as this, or getting down to nice ladies' hands, we can use some small snips like these, nice and clean. We remove the lower leaves of these here, and we cut it back to we know there, where we reduce the tip like that, and take the centre tip out there. That reduces the transpiration of the cutting to help it do.
So that's all you need, is just that little piece there?
Yes, it is. Along with that, you need to have some what they call hormone powder, and hormone powder is in little containers. It's really available from all garden centres, and that helps to form the callus and the rooting of the cutting. So we tip that into the tip of the hormone powder, and then we put that into our tray. So I've got some here that's already been made up.
That's handy. So when you get it like this, do we just sort of place it in? Do they go very deep?
Yes, we use a small small skewer for that, and make the holes and put them in like so. I've got one or two that are already made here, Melissa, for you today. For at home, it's quite easy to get a pot, get some nice washed river sand, and that's really available from all gravel and sand merchants. Must be washed and clean, and get some small wire and make a wee tent. And what that is doing is making a nice humidity microenvironment for the cuttings to germinate inside there.
That was very interesting, thank you.
You're most welcome anytime, Melissa.
Well, that's all we've got time for this week, but before we go, let's see what's happening on next week's show. It's the sweet, sweet smell of flowers. Join us as I take a look at rose spraying, flower ranging, and much, much more. If you'd like more information on the Certificate in General Horticulture, contact the team at SIT on 0800 SIT to learn.
Live for this day, no